Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. It is Brandy Mabra, and today we are doing a Q&A. So this is for my multi-six-figure practice owners, and there's a lot of questions that I get, and even to the point of we were preparing for our Austin retreat. I was actually traveling to it, and my flight got delayed. And I did what I called a CEO Power Hour. So if you follow me on Instagram, then that's something actually in Q3 that we're going to be doing more of. So CEO Power Hours where you can ask me anything. And there were a lot of great questions that came through. My delay did not allow for me to answer all of them, but there was still a lot of great questions. So I thought that we could do an episode for multi-six-figure practice owners. Welcome to CEO Conversations, the private practice podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Mabra. It's time to show up as a confident leader to create a practice and life you love. And so the first one is, since I've hit the multi-six-figure level, what should my role as CEO look like now? And what do I need to let go of? When you're at the multi-six-figure level, you have to shed the identity of a six-figure practice owner and actually take on the identity of a seven-figure practice owner. How you lead is different, right? So in order to get to six figures, you can be in the weeds of your practice. You're learning all of the departments. You're learning how to schedule. You're learning how to do patient and client follow-up. You're learning the billing. You're learning the nuances of the patient-client avatar. You're learning how to market. Like, you're wearing all the hats. When you get to the six figures, and then definitely as you're scaling into multi-six, you have to have the team in order to help you get to the next place that you're going. So the best thing that you can do is to shed your six-figure identity and start to take on the seven-figure identity, because that's literally the next stage of business growth. And it's more or less about team. It's all about team and maturing that team and mentoring that team and coaching that team. So the second question is, how do I build a leadership team or clinical director role so I'm not the bottleneck? Well, your clinical director role is actually part of your leadership team, but there is a whole episode that I've recorded about how to build up your leadership team. So I'll tell you really quickly a mistake that I see when people build out their leadership teams. They build out leadership teams before they're ready. So they will be like in that multi-six figure, and all of a sudden they have like this operations director, this COO, this HR director, and it's a multi-six figure practice. You want to make sure, again, when you're stepping into that seven figure, you should be as close to seven figures as possible when you start to have a leadership team. So even for the clients that we work with who are hitting seven figures this year, we're honing in on those specific leadership positions, and we're setting up the foundation. So instead of a operations director, we're starting off with either an office manager or an office coordinator. So that way they're able to progress into an operations director or a practice manager. We're also looking at where, like the clinical director, we're hiring specific providers that have leadership potential, or identifying who can be the clinical lead within those providers. So that way you can eventually have your clinical director when you get past the seven figures. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining the profitability as the revenue is coming in. And the best way to do that is making sure that you're setting yourself up for success and not overextending yourself with fancy titles, and you're setting yourself up for what your practice needs today. So you need, when you get to multi-six, especially high multi-six, you start to feel the pressure of, I need someone else to help me lead, and which is appropriate, but you don't want to give out, again, big titles. You want to make sure that you meet yourself where you are. But there's a whole episode on that. So how can systems and automation help free up my time and my team's time without sacrificing the patient experience? This is a really good question. Oh, wow. This is a really good question. And the reason why is because right now we're in the midst of AI. Healthcare is relationship building. It is the foundation of healthcare is all based on relationships. There's so many intimate conversations that happen inside of an exam room, inside of a therapist's office, inside of clinics, inside of surgery, like so many intimate conversations. So there has to be a balance between the automation, or even where AI can step in, and the human touch. years and years and years and years back, like back in the dinosaur ages, when you have 20 plus years of healthcare experience, when the very first kiosk came out, like self check-in, there's a company called Clearwave. They're actually still around. Clearwave, you see a version of this like in the CVS Minute clinics. You see a version of this where you can walk in and you're doing the self check-in where you're entering your own patient information. You actually see a version of this even through apps as well. But Clearwave was the company. I was actually at an ophthalmology practice at the time. And so this was early in my practice management days, and we had to implement it. And the biggest thing was people were so used to talking to the front desk person, having conversation, having someone check them in, take their insurance card, be able to chat it up. How was your day? Oh, so good to see you. You know, all of those things. And so that gets missing when you have a kiosk. There's no human connection, right? But it also, from a productivity standpoint, it sped everybody up, right? So if you fast forward to today, there's a lot of systems like that I've implemented. So there's another one called Phreesia. There is another one, especially for the mental health space, the receptionist. So there are these ways that you can get information in real time that does not require a person. And a lot of times the person who's helping you is either AI, where it's more automated, where it can pull in that information from other sources, or it's the patient that is actually taking the lead. What you don't want to do, and even going back to the situation with Clearwave, is we still had to have some version of a human touch to make sure that the automation, first of all, was working. The second part of it was that way we didn't lose the human connection piece, and people still felt welcomed. You see this at the airport where we're all doing self-check-in technically, right? And even when you see the kiosk, there's still someone floating around. Hey, how are you doing? You know, you don't need the 20 customer service agents checking you in. You need one or two. So that's where the efficiency comes into play. That's where you can hire less team. But you still need somebody to give that human touch and have that human experience. So that way people can still feel warm and fuzzy as they're telling you all the intimate details about their care, right? So there's a balance with that. The next question is, how do I stop feeling guilty about stepping back from clinical work? I would ask yourself the question, this is from a career perspective, what's going to bring you joy? Right? And so if the clinical work still lights you up, then how can you incorporate some of that clinical work into your day-to-day without losing touch of what you want for your career? The other thing that's coming up for me as I read this question is, where is the guilt coming from? Is the guilt coming from wanting to please other people? Or is the guilt coming from because I've paid for this expensive education and I'm not using it? Or I'm not using it to the extent of what I thought I was going to use it, or maybe what I see and even what I've experienced for myself, like some resentment towards the fact that I picked this direction instead of this other direction. So getting clear on where the guilt is coming from, so that way you can either insert part of it. So for the clients that we work with, is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Right. So if you love clinical work and it brings you joy, then maybe instead of getting rid of your whole schedule, maybe you're maximizing your time, right? Maybe you're maximizing your time because you could be running a group. You could be doing speaking about a certain clinical skill set. You could still keep maybe a few patients on your schedule on a monthly basis or weekly basis. So that way you can still stay in tuned. So really defining what your version of success looks like and how you want to show up inside of your practice and how you want to show up in your career is the best answer that I feel I can give you based on what my experience is. At the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer with this question. It's more or less what you want to see for yourself and being comfortable with it and being confident that you're making the right decision for you. From a business perspective and from a leadership perspective, what I can tell you is it's a hard thing to be full-blown clinician in the day-to-day seeing patients all day, every day, and still run a business. Somebody has to run the business. Somebody has to make sure that the business is moving forward. Somebody has to make sure that revenue is coming in, metrics are being hit, the vision is clear, especially as you have team. right? The business culture is on point. And that's a hard thing to juggle when you're still acting as the employee, right, along with the other team, and you're not being the CEO or the CEO seat is vacant. So when you're thinking about this, be honest with yourself. And this is especially as you're going back to the other question about leadership, as you're hiring additional leaders, as you're setting yourself up. And if you know that you want to have more hands-on clinical work, what leaders can you bring in and what strengths are they coming with, so that way you can have a balance of both. But even those leaders will need for you to be the CEO in order to set the tone for them too. So you have to find what works for you and then be mindful of who's going to be in that CEO seat. That's my answer for that one. How can I take real time off without everything falling apart or my revenue dropping? This is where your culture of accountability comes into play. And this is where you're setting expectations. And this is where you're having standard operating procedures. And this is where you're very clear on the performance of your practice. More times than not, things don't just fall off overnight. It's a buildup over time. So it might seem connected because I've stepped out of the office, everything has fallen apart, but everything's been falling apart for a really long time. You've just been the person there to hold it all together. And the leaks, when we're like the boat is sinking and all the leaks are coming through and you're like trying to put your hand on to stop the leak here, and you're trying to put your hand over here to stop the leak over there. And then you're trying to use your foot to cover the leak, and the boat is going down. It doesn't happen. The boat doesn't sink overnight. So it's a progression of things that have happened over months and years to get you to this point. So I would say that for you to be set up for success, in order to step away and for things to still run without you, it's starting with you as the CEO and then getting very clear on the performance of the practice and getting into the details of the practice and understanding operationally what needs to happen with your workflows, making sure that, again, the team is very clear on the KPIs that need to be hit. You have things documented. If you're going to be out of the office, everybody knows what to do. And if you can't do that, the boat will go down. The boat will go down. How do I empower my team to lead without me instead of training them to depend on me? You give them the resources that they need to be successful. I don't know how any other way to put it. There are other episodes where we talk through operations, we talk through marketing, and how to empower your team when it comes to taking on other tasks within the practice, and how to rate your team, right? So there's a really great episode for you to rate your team and for you to decide if your team is an asset or a liability. And when you decide that and you get very clear on that, then the question is, if they're a liability, what do you need to do to turn them into an asset? And if they're an asset, what do you need to do in order to maintain and keep them as an asset? So your team needs the resources to be successful. When your team has the resources to be successful inside of your practice, it makes things so much easier. Okay, the last question that I'm going to answer is, what task are private practice owners still doing that someone else on their team could do 80% as well or better with the right training? There's many roles inside of a practice that a team member could do 80% as well. Marketing, certain aspects of it. If you are as the CEO, you are technically the brand of the practice, especially in today's economy. I think that's really important. So you are the place where you're speaking on stage, you're putting the brand out there, you're talking about how the amazingness of the providers that you're in, that are inside of your practice, that's your role. However, if there's a community event, if there is a networking opportunity, if there are like provider drop-ins that you're doing, a team member can help with those things, right? And it can be 80%, and they can still get as much visibility, or they can build that relationship with a patient the same way that you could. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I would say 80% when it comes to a lot of the admin tasks. More times than not, people freak out because I can get back to a person in 30 minutes and my admin takes 3 hours. It's okay. It is okay. If that person can get back to them within 3 hours, and if it's mandatory for it to be 30 minutes, then identify the priorities that need to be 30 minutes for them and what else can wait the 3 hours. So it's 80%. I would say another place would be, going back to the marketing, would be like social media. Like if there is a graphic that looks good and it's not killing your brand, or the colors might be a little bit off, it's okay. It is okay. So you're looking for what is the overall picture and what does success look like, and where does 80% count? More times than not, 80% counts, or is 80% is good enough, like in your marketing, in some of the admin areas. Where you don't want 80%, because I'll talk to that, would be in your patient care, because 80% could kill somebody. If someone is only functioning at 80%, you need for them to function at 100%, so that way they have that clear clinical judgment and medical judgment. So that's a place where you cannot accept 80%. Another place that you might not want 80% would be in the financial pillar. So when we're talking about like the accuracy of billing needs to be at least 95%, if not 99, 100% accurate. So that way you're not getting all these denied claims or money's just falling through the cracks. That skill set is important, because if they are not billing correctly, then money could, again, insurance fraud is a thing and could happen. So you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success with that. But 80% more times than not, especially in like the admin roles, is good enough. It is good enough. So those are the questions for the multi-six-figure practice owner Q&A. And, there is a really great CEO Moves newsletter that comes out weekly, where you can get actions to go along with the podcast episode. To get on the CEO Moves newsletter, go ahead and see the link where you can actually subscribe and secure your seat for the next Private Practice CEO Lunch and Learn series, which is an amazing experience where you get to hang out with me for 1 to 2 hours a day for 5 days. In addition to that, you'll automatically get access to the CEO Moves, where every week you'll be able to take action and move your practice forward. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the episode and it empowers you as the CEO of your practice. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe, share the message, and leave a review. If you want more information and support in growing and scaling your practice, click the link in the show notes to take advantage of our free resources or apply to work with me directly. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.